You clicked this because you've probably paid one of these firms a stupid amount of money for advice that sounded smart but meant nothing. Or you've just heard the names, Deloitte, PwC, and assumed they knew what they were doing because everyone else trusts them too. Turns out you weren't crazy to be suspicious. This entire industry is quietly falling apart. Before we get into it, hit subscribe if you're into these deep dives on companies quietly collapsing behind the scenes, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever put money into one of these companies, stock, investments, anything, and whether you're regretting it right about now. Oh, and if you haven't seen it yet, I did a whole video on how Copilot completely failed. That one's wild too. You can click the card on screen right now to watch it after this. Okay, let's get into it. Start with Deloitte. In December 2024, the Australian government hired them, the biggest professional services firm on earth, to help fix a broken welfare system. 7 months of work, $290,000 in fees. And the final report? Big chunks of it were written by AI. Fake quotes. A court case that never happened. A citation to a study that doesn't exist. Just made up and handed in like it was normal. From a company whose entire price tag is built on being careful. And it's not just them. Around the same time, PwC got caught doing something worse. Senior partners secretly used confidential government information to help huge tech companies dodge tax. And across the board, these massive trusted firms are cutting jobs, losing clients, looking a lot less untouchable. So here's what we're actually digging into. How did firms like this get so big and so trusted that almost every major company on earth handed them the keys? No questions asked. And why is that whole system cracking now? Because I promise you, this isn't really about AI. AI just exposed a problem that's been building for years. So how did these companies get this powerful? In the 1970s, companies like Coca-Cola, IBM, and Ford started spreading out across the globe. And that created a problem. If your money's moving through dozens of countries, each with different tax rules, you need someone independent to check the books, the same way, everywhere. That's what created firms like Deloitte and PwC, back then known as the Big Eight. And this industry runs almost entirely on reputation. When it's time for your audit, you're either picking a brand new firm nobody's heard of, or a giant name that's been doing this for decades. Most people play it safe every time. So smaller firms got swallowed up one by one. And over the years that shrunk the Big Eight down toward just a handful of names. Then in 2001, one of those giants, Arthur Andersen, completely collapsed after they failed to catch Enron hiding billions of dollars in debt. Almost overnight, a company that had existed for nearly a century was gone. That, combined with years of mergers, is how we landed on just 4. You'd think watching a firm that size die overnight would make the rest cautious. Instead, the survivors just absorbed their clients and got even bigger. And once you're one of only 4 companies doing this job worldwide, you stop worrying about competition, which sounds great for them. But it comes with a downside they're only just starting to feel now. Okay, so here's what actually happens once you stop worrying about competition. Quality quietly falls apart, and nobody notices for years, because who's going to fire you if there's nowhere else to go? A few years back, regulators actually went and checked the work these firms were doing. And what they found wasn't great. 43% of EY's audits didn't even have enough evidence behind them to support what they were signing off on. Basically, homework that wasn't properly done. Not long after, EY had to walk away from 84 clients and give up over $200 million in fees, just to clean up the mess. And it wasn't just EY's numbers that looked bad. Across all 4 big firms, the rate of sloppy, under-supported audits more than doubled in just a couple of years. Let that sink in for a second. Nearly half of EY's audits, from one of the world's most trusted names, basically weren't done properly. And these aren't cheap services either. They're some of the most expensive money can buy. So companies started asking the obvious question. Why are we paying this much for work that's this sloppy? A lot of them started bringing the work in-house, or handing it to smaller firms instead. And that's the moment the cracks stopped being something you could hide behind a good reputation. Now here's where it gets genuinely messy, because these firms didn't just do audits. Over time, they built out massive consulting arms too. Deloitte Consulting, PwC Strategy, the works. And by a few years ago, they were making way more money from giving advice than from actually checking books. Which sounds fine until you realize what that actually means. The same company checking whether your books are accurate is also the company you're paying to improve how your business runs. That's like grading your own homework and also being the one who wrote it. And it gets worse, because the auditing side gets access to a ton of confidential information. Information that would be incredibly valuable for the consulting side of the same company to quietly use. Obviously, that's illegal, and these firms all claim they have strict internal walls to stop it from happening. In theory. In practice, here's what actually happened. Starting in December 2013, a PwC partner in Australia was brought in to help the government design new laws to stop big multinational companies from dodging tax. He signed confidentiality agreements, multiple ones. But over the next few years, he quietly shared that same confidential information with dozens of his own partners at PwC, who used it to help clients, including Google, get ahead of a law that PwC itself had helped write. Let that sit for a second. They helped write the law meant to stop tax dodging, and then quietly helped their own clients dodge it anyway. Once that came out, PwC didn't just get a slap on the wrist. They were forced to sell off their entire government consulting business for $1. Not a typo, $1. Because once trust like that is gone, it doesn't really matter how big your logo is. So once regulators actually started paying attention, things moved fast. After the PwC scandal in Australia, the UK forced all 4 big firms to operationally separate their audit business from the rest of the company. Even the US, which usually doesn't love regulating anything, started seriously talking about breaking these firms up. And here's the problem for them. The consulting side is the profitable side. That's where most of the money comes from now. But it only exists because the auditing side gave it credibility and access in the first place. Cut them apart, and both halves get weaker. But honestly, even without government stepping in, these firms might be in trouble anyway. Because for decades, their biggest advantage wasn't just their name, it was cheap labor. Armies of junior staff doing data entry, document review, basic research. That's what let them charge huge fees and still turn a profit. And remember that AI report Deloitte got caught faking at the start of this video. Turns out that wasn't a one-off mistake. It's a preview of the whole industry's future. Deloitte's graduate hiring has already dropped 18%. EY's down 11%. Across the board, graduate job postings at these firms fell 44% in a single year because the entry-level grunt work that used to require hundreds of junior staff can now be done by a much smaller team with the right software. Which means the size of a firm, the thing that used to be their biggest strength, suddenly isn't the advantage it used to be. So you've got 2 things happening to these giants at the exact same time. Governments are forcing them apart, and the technology that just embarrassed them is quietly making their old business model pointless. Either one on its own would be a serious problem. Both at once, that's a company in real trouble. So what actually fills the gap these giants leave behind? A few things, probably all at once. Some companies will just stop outsourcing this work altogether. Why pay millions for an outside opinion when AI can do most of it internally in an afternoon? Others will turn to smaller, boutique firms. Because for the first time in decades, a team of 30 people with the right AI tools can produce work that used to take 300. But here's the one I actually find most interesting. Some of this work might not need a firm at all. A single experienced professional, someone who spent 15 years inside one of these giants and knows exactly what clients actually need, could deliver the same result completely alone. No armies of junior staff, no massive overhead, no logo. Just someone good at the job, undercutting a 100-year-old industry by simply not needing it anymore. Basically, the entire model that dominated corporate America for the better part of a century was built on being too big, too trusted, and too expensive to question. And the moment people actually started checking the work, that whole illusion started falling apart. So next time you see one of these logos on a building and assume they must know what they're doing, just remember, so did the Australian government. Right before their $290,000 report turned out to be partly written by a robot that made up a court case. If you found this one interesting, subscribe, there's more of these coming. And I actually want to know, have you ever dealt with one of these firms yourself? Tell me what happened in the comments.